having a startup back in India in 2014 to promote secure coding and cybersecurity. He has trained over 20,000 students in AWS cybersecurity, web development, and IoT. And he's been doing it for the 9 years. He is trained previously in Concordia also. And if you are from India, then he has done it in IIT Bombay and IIT BHU, which is one of the prestigious institute back in India. And he's currently working in Morgan Stanley, along with working as an instructor in Vanier College. And he holds around 7 certification in cloud, Scrum, and security. So if you have any doubts, just feel free to ask him. It's better that nobody unmutes during the session, and you can write it in the chat. Rest, it's up to Javesh how he wants to handle it. And over to you, Javesh.
Thank you so much, Ruchika, for the introduction. And as I see more and more people are joining in with time, I think it'll be a good idea to send everyone a reminder email, just to be sure that people who forgot about this join if they have to. And because I am not 100% sure if we'll be able to record the entire session. I've started the recording, but like Zoom recordings are long, and I'm not sure if they'll go on for 6 hours. We might, I'm not sure if we'll be able to convert them. And even if we do that, uploading a 4 or 5 GB file, I'm not 100% sure if that'll be possible. So I'll recommend all of you to attend all the sessions. Now, a little bit about what's going to happen in the 8 sessions, because it requires a commitment of your 8 days, and that's a lot of time. So you should know what the expectations are, and what we are going to cover, so that uh, you know we can match your expectations basically. Now, this is a fundamentals workshop. That means that we'll be covering the basics. It's for everyone who is a beginner on Azure, or is learning Azure, or maybe has even worked on Azure but has not given the basic 3 fundamental certifications. So since it's a certification workshop and we have to cover the preparation for 3 certifications in just 4 week time in the weekends, so we'll have quite some content to be covered. Now the question is, what makes this session different from what you see a course online? Like you might see a lot of content on Udemy. You might be looking at books. You might be looking at YouTube videos. Now this is a live session. The advantage of a live session is, if I'm explaining something and you feel that you're not able to connect, or you're not able to understand a particular concept, that concept could be answered, your doubts could be cleared within the session itself, right? Now, looking at the participants right now, I think we're 89 in the call. It might be plus minus 10, 15. At times, I mean, I've been quite experienced with workshops, and especially with online workshops. I'll not be surprised if the count drops down to 50 at some time. And I'll also not be surprised if the count goes above 120, 130 at, within a few days. That's absolutely fine. Now, talking in terms of what I have planned, and again, this is very, very dynamic. Reason being, this is a workshop for the students, considering the fact that, it might take some time for all of you to adapt. It might take some time for all of you to understand what's happening. So some topics might be relatively covered quickly. Some might take slightly more time. And that totally depends upon the number of questions you ask me. So it's not hard and fast, but what I have anticipated, what my plan is, that first 3 sessions, like day 1, day 2, day 3, that's today, tomorrow, and next Saturday, we would be covering enough content to give AZ-900, that's Azure Cloud Fundamental Certification. Now, AZ-900 certification in Canada will cost you about 99 US dollars. However, there are ways to give the certification, to get a voucher for free. Okay. So I'll be talking about that after we are done with a little bit of content. So not talking about that right now. Similarly, the cost for AI 900, that's the second certification that we'll prepare for on day 4 and 5, is again $99. But again, there's a way to get a free voucher, and it is totally ethical. So I'll be talking about that, but not right now, because I just do not want all of you to be focused on the exam. However, if you start preparing now, these sessions are going to be enough for you to understand what Azure works like. Now, these certifications require you to have some theoretical knowledge. So, though I come from a background where, I love to experiment and I love to show you a lot of practicals, but these certifications have a lot of services that you need to know about, but they necessarily do not want you to know the practicals. They want you to be aware. For example, if there are two services that could do the same task, they want you to know what are the options, what is the costing, what makes one service better than the other, to compare between them. So those are the things that you might be looking at in this course. The last certification that we have is DP900. uh, According to me, by far the most difficult certification of this set. Reason being, the number of services covered in DP900 are a lot. So over there, we might focus slightly more on understanding what things are rather than doing the practical, because 3 days and about 20 to 25 services that you're expected to learn, we will just focus on the concepts. However, not to make the session a very boring session, I have planned a lot of practicals along the way. Now, I hope all of you are from Concordia. So since you are from Concordia, you would be registered in Concordia as of now. You would be given a free account from Azure itself. You need to use your concordia.edu or concordia.ca email address. I'll talk more about that, how to get the free account. I might ask you guys to share your screen at that time because I might not have my Concordia account anymore. So Ruchika did describe a little bit about me. So I passed out of Concordia and I've got about 9 years of industrial experience conducting workshops of this sort. And so, but I'm not so sure if my Concordia ID works. I did not want to try it before the event because if I create my account once, I'll not be able to show the same screen to you, right? Because then my account will be created. I'll need someone else to share it. So don't worry about that. All that is about to come. As far as the sessions are planned, we'll be starting at 10 every morning, and we'll continue all the way up to 12 in one stretch, 10 to 12, and then I'll give you a break. The break is also a doubt session. So for example, I cannot have 96 or 95 hands raised, and I would not be able to answer all the questions at once. Whatever you have in your mind, just drop the question in chat. I have Ruchika. She has just cleared the first two certifications. The first one is AZ-900, and I think yesterday you cleared AI-900. So congratulations on that. So for basic questions, you might help me with the answers in the chat. But if there's anything unresolved, whenever we take a break, that's when it's a break for the others, but it's not a break for me. At that time, I'll be answering all the questions that you guys might have come across. I'll also give you the opportunity to share your screen, ask your doubts, and you'll understand the depth of it as we progress, because more and more practicals would be coming along the way. So then the second session, like the second part of the session, will be from 12 to 2, where again we'll learn something new, and then we'll have another 1 hour of doubt session or break. So essentially, out of these 6 hours, we are looking at 4 hours of continuous teaching time and 2 hours of doubt sessions. And even if something is not answered after that, we'll talk more about it. However, at the end of the certification, end of the content that I have to cover, I'll also be talking about the frequently asked questions in the exam. So it's going to be, practicing for the exact questions. Now, from my experience, the probability of an individual attending the entire session and going through the material, because now the material that I'm giving you is not copied from the internet. It's not, it's all custom. So it's not something that, I just downloaded from there. Took quite some time to create this content, and it aligns with the latest documentation of Azure, Microsoft Azure. Now, with the Microsoft Azure documentation, the thing is that, it's kind of long. So you guys could read the documentation on your own, and then you could just go ahead and clear the certification. It's not difficult, but the time it would take for someone new, especially because the reason you were asked in the form was, have you been do you have some prior experience on Azure? Now, more than 75% of the enrollments are totally new to Azure. So please understand that if you have worked on Azure, if you're an expert, I'll try to answer your questions as much as I can in the doubt session. But for the main session, I would have to consider that 75% of my audience is totally beginner, right? So I need to make sure that everyone is eligible enough to clear the certification. However, at the end of this training, you'll be given a certificate of attendance, saying that you have, studied for these 3 certifications. It's not the same thing as getting a certification, but trust me, if you attend all the sessions and the materials that I share with you at the end. So as I said, it's all custom, it's all updated. It was just updated, day before yesterday. That means that my target to update the material is every Wednesday night. So if any update comes, and cloud technology is ever evolving, right? It's not the same. I cannot be using a material that I was using 2 years ago because things change over here. So the material is always up to date. So the earlier you prepare for it, the earlier you give the certification, that's going to be great. Now, I won't be surprised, let's say if by next week we finish the preparation for AZ-900. I think next Sunday we do not have the event because ECSG is having another event. So if you just prepare, whatever you learn in these 3 sessions, it's going to be a good time for you. Sunday, you just revise everything because I'll email everything to you by tomorrow itself, whatever we'll cover till Saturday. I'll not be surprised if after, within the next 2-3 days, you might just go and clear the certification as well. So you'll be prepared to that extent. However, I'm not sure if you'll be able to get the free voucher so quickly. But again, I'll talk more about that as we progress. Okay. So that's pretty much about what I had to introduce you guys to. Now, starting with the first part of today's session, as I said, there are many students who are totally new to this concept. So for that very reason, we would be starting with the conceptual part. I'm not going to call it theoretical because I use draw.io a lot. I'm not sure if you guys have seen it. It's like a whiteboard. I'll be using drawing and illustrations. I'll be drawing a lot of live content to explain the concept. So once we understand the concept, I'll be asking you if everyone's good. If anyone has a question, you raise your hand. I give you the opportunity to either type or talk, depending upon how many people have a doubt, and then we proceed to the next concept. Okay, so and a lot of links will be given to official Azure documentation, so no blogs. I would not recommend you using any other blogs, any other services, because the information, you're not 100% sure how accurate that is. So whenever you have to read about the certification, it's best to read from the original source. So you can always go back to the official Azure documentation for some topics that you might have doubts with. Other than that, the content that I'll share will be enough to clear the certification. Okay, so let me get started by sharing my screen. Also, I'd like to remind all of you, Ruchika, and today it's Ruchika, it might be Shiva, it might be Sindhuja. So these 3 are the department representatives from ECSGA who are coordinating this event. So they would be monitoring the chat and they'll be, doing the moderation. So like just a quick note from them, and that is that you have to be present in the sessions. Due to some reason XYZ, if you cannot be there for one session or something, just let them know so that it doesn't, impact your eligibility to get the certificate in the end. Yeah, so someone has a question. You can ask me before I begin. Go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Jivesh and Rishika. Actually, I have a question regarding, I see that you are recording the session, but actually I want to know how to get access to the recorded files and also the slides. Because sometimes, for me, I have a baby and it's not easy to follow the session according to the schedule. So I need another time to follow the session and watch the videos and continue.
Okay, to answer that, as I said, I am recording the session on my end. I'll try my level best to process the recording and upload it. But the problem with Zoom is in high definition. I mean, when I record a session for my college classes as well, the recording turns out to be close to 1 GB per hour, approximately. So we need to find a way to compress it. Again, not very sure, because 6 hours continuous session, and this current Concordia Zoom license does not have cloud recording and stuff, so it gets processed on the computer. So I'm not 100% sure if this recording would be available or not. I'm just recording to be positive that it might be available. I'll try my level best that it is, but if it is, a 6 GB recording or something, it might be difficult to share it, and then it might be difficult to process it as well. The way Zoom records is it does not record on the cloud. For this license, it's recording on my personal computer. And that is not a format like MP4 or, a video format that can be uploaded. That's a Zoom custom format. So I need to double click on it. I need to run the converter. It's going to convert the entire video into another format. At times it might take, 12 hours on a stretch to just convert the recording. So I've seen those scenarios. That's why I'll try my level best. Again, it's not 100% assurance, but we will try to do it as much as we can. And if not the full session, maybe we could do it in parts. Ruchika, I guess that works. So maybe first session I'll record, second you can record. I think that should work out, right? So that we have the, like, we won't record the doubt sessions, but we'll record the time when I'm explaining a concept, so that the recordings can be short, sweet, and then they could be shared. Definitely we could do them over Google Cloud. We could be doing them over, maybe we could just have a Azure link as well. So Google Drive, anything is fine, right? So don't worry about that. Okay. So a little bit about my experience in terms of cloud. I have certifications in Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, AWS, Azure, quite a wide spectrum. And I've also worked on GCP as well. But my main area, where I work, is AWS and Azure. So for Azure certifications, what the requirement of Microsoft is that you understand what services are there, so that you can, let's say if you work in an organization, you could be talking about, how to implement Azure and what are the kind of services that an organization can use to fulfill their needs. Okay. And these certifications are kind of, I'll say fundamental and very helpful when you're trying to look for a job. So they can be really, really helpful. Starting with AZ-900, that's the first, Azure Cloud Fundamental Certification. It is not specific to a field. Like if we talk about AI 900, that's specified into artificial intelligence. We talk about SC900, that's into security. PL is for power apps. So they have, this set of certifications, this 900 series, that's called the fundamental series. Okay. DP is data, and that is, again, we come to that later. But the first one that we talk about and we cover in this workshop is Azure Cloud Fundamentals. That is AZ-900 certification. So before we go into the details of AZ-900, it's very important for us, or, even before we talk about Azure, it's very important for us to understand what is cloud computing. Now, I'm quite sure many of you would have already heard this, read this, and don't worry, I'm not going to read from the slide. I'm just going to tell you in general terms, what is cloud computing. Now, a few days ago, I was just seeing, a guy wear a t-shirt and it had some cloud logo on top, and it said, cloud is nothing, it's just someone else's computer. And trust me, that's like the by far the easiest definition to understand cloud. Cloud is basically when you have on-demand IT resources. By IT resources, I mean, or even before I go to the definition, let me talk about something generic with all of you. Let's say you want to create a website. Okay. To create a website, the bare minimum thing you might need is, obviously you might have to write some code, but at the same time, you might want to deploy and host the code as well, right? So when you're looking for a web hosting, or when you're trying to host your code, you are looking for a virtual machine. A virtual machine will be a computer which has some RAM, which has some ROM, which has an operating system, which has a programming language. So for example, if you have PHP, if your website is written in PHP, you might be having PHP, installed. And then what you need to do is you need to write some code. And once you write some code, that code needs to be deployed, right? So let me take you to draw.io. Just give me a sec. Okay, so I hope you guys can see my screen. Okay. Let's say we have a requirement to create a virtual machine. Okay. Now, this machine needs to have RAM. I'm just talking about the components that go in the background. It needs to have a disk. It needs to have a network. Along with this, it needs to have, and this is all about the hardware, right? So it needs to have an operating system. What else do you think we might need? I'm just talking about the bare minimum resources. Obviously, power supply and additional details are different, but it needs a programming language like a platform. And obviously, it needs to have your source code. Because let's say if you are creating a website, you need to have some code, right? Let me monitor the chat as well. You guys can't see anything? Can just some
No, we can see.
you can, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So initially I was just opening this up. So okay, programming language, and then you have some source code. So what you need to understand over here is you could, like, let's say if we were in 2008, we could have just gone and purchased a machine which had some RAM. So we could have said that, we're looking for a 4 GB RAM. We could have said we're looking for maybe a 1 terabyte hard disk drive, not a SSD, because we are back in 2008. We could have said that we need 100 Gbps internet connection. And then we could have selected an operating system that could have been either Linux, or that could have been, maybe Windows, a Windows server. So Mac obviously was not very prominent with servers at that time, so that might have not been an option for a server. And then you might have installed a programming language like Python, PHP, Node.js, whatever the choice of your programming language is. And then you might have written some source code on top, right? Now, the problem with this is this was a very slow and a very expensive solution. The reason being, if this was not a virtual machine, you would need maybe a few days to raise a purchase order to purchase the hardware. You would have to license the operating system. So you might have to go and purchase a Windows, operating system license. You might want to install the programming language on your own. And then you might want to take care of the antivirus so that no one attacks you. You need to take care of the physical security so that no one steals your machine away. You need to be sure that you have a power supply backup. So if there's a power outage, you cannot say, right, that you're creating the next website, which is very popular, like, abc.com. And then you can say that, abc.com is down because there's a power outage in the server. No, that's not how it works. So you need a power supply as well. You need to have physical security. You do not want someone to steal your hardware away, right? That might just turn your website down or your application down. And then obviously you need to be sure that your source code is well written. It is, it does not have bugs, so that, it's working the way it should be. Now that's what is, computing in general. Now, when we talk about cloud computing, it refers to on-demand delivery of computer services. Like, for example, if you want a database, you want a virtual machine, like where you can install some software on it. You might be looking for, some sort of a virtual appliance. You might be looking for something like, some analytic solution, some software solution. For example, how many of you, I won't ask this question because, again, I know most of you might have seen it. Many of you might have seen that you can use, Microsoft Office 365, which is that they took Microsoft Office online, and now you can run your PowerPoint, you can access your Word documents, you can use Google Docs, again, another product. And these products, these entire softwares are running on the cloud, and you can be accessing them from your browser. You don't need to install the software, right? You do not install the software, you just open it in your browser. And if you have the right access, you would be able to run PowerPoint, you will be able to run Word, you'll be able to, run other resources on just your browser. And that makes this cloud computing concept so in demand, because now you can have on-demand resources. Now I'll tell you the major benefit. if we were looking at a non-cloud model, it would have taken us a lot of months, or maybe at least a couple of days to provision the hardware, to buy it, to install software, to install operating system, to manage it. So a lot of capital expense on our side, right? Let's say if tomorrow one of us has to open, a website, we need a lot of money to buy the server. But now with the moving of cloud, the cloud being popular, it has made our life very easy, because just with a few clicks, we can get something very similar. We do not see it. It is not our machine. We are just renting it. So we have moved from buying hardware to renting it out or leasing it out for the time we need. And that's why if we look at the definition, cloud computing refers to the delivery of on-demand computer resources. You could rent out a virtual machine, you could rent out a database, you could rent out, almost anything that you could think of in a physical appliance. You might have some of the other solution providing a cloud service for that. Okay. And as we progress further in the document, in the definition, it says you only need to pay for what you use rather than making large upfront investment in infrastructure. So tomorrow, if you have a website idea which you're not sure if it's going to succeed or not, if you would have bought the hardware, you have a lot of investment. But now, if you've rented it, you are risk-free. You do not have a lot of risk associated. That means that the probability of something going low is, something going bad is very, very low. Does that make sense? Give me a thumbs up. I mean, I might want you to be interactive. So, I might not allow all of you to unmute, because then that will take up a lot of time, but just give me a thumbs up. And if anyone has a question, you can raise your hand. Just a basic definition, I guess. Okay. Now talking about Azure. Now, I'll first start with Azure, and then I'll talk about, because this is a very commonly asked question, not from this workshop, but generally people ask me, should I start learning AWS? Should I start learning Azure? Should I start learning Google Cloud? Right? So these are the three major providers, and this is what confuses people these days. Because ultimately, if all of you are here to understand which cloud service provider might be the best for your career, right? Or maybe why Azure. So we'll answer that question later on, but just to give you a quick, background of Azure. So Azure is a product by Microsoft, and it's a cloud computing platform. It provides a lot of services. Now, the speciality of Azure, I mean, the services that Azure provides to you are not just restricted to the basic virtual machine service or the database service. Just like any other cloud platform leader, Azure has some AI services, it has some IoT services, and hosting services, remote storage, database, so a vast variety of services. Now, when we talk about AI and IoT, so the question is, let's say if you are an organization, because I have been on the other side of the table, knowing that what organizations look for when they look in cloud. So it's again a very common question. Why do organizations, when they're making a decision, if they have to choose between AWS, they have to choose between Azure, they have to choose between Google Cloud, what makes the decision a little easy for them? So the first things first, you might be aware that Microsoft is a very, very, very big player when it comes to IT. So majority of the corporate computers are running on Windows as an operating system. That naturally makes them, more, the developers and the users more used to the interface. Now, in certain organizations, they might be using Mac, they might be using Linux, but mostly in the corporate world, Windows is a market leader. Now, since Windows is a market leader, people are used to the user interface, people are used to the services, people have the skills to write, code in the languages that are compatible with Windows. And that's what makes Azure a preferable option. That is a very, very major reason that, organizations are looking for this Azure skill set. Because when organizations are already working with Microsoft for one or the other product, the probability is high, they might want to go to Azure. Now, AWS has its own advantages, Azure has its own, and this is not a workshop to compare, what's good and what's bad, but the number of people who are starting their cloud journey, or the number of organizations that are shifting to cloud. Now, in this year, I believe majority of the Fortune 500 companies are already using cloud in some way or the other, right? And even if they're not, they definitely might be having some pipelines or some plans where they plan to use cloud. Now with Azure, the advantage is it's a backed up cloud, and Microsoft is having a very good support system in terms of product support, in terms of the documentation that they have, in terms of the certification that they have. And that's why they encourage a lot of people to learn the technology, so that if more people are skilled in Azure, more companies might just start going on the product as well. So now moving on, answering the question, why Azure over others? So Azure offers a wide variety of services. So do the other competitors as well. But now what makes it different from the other competitors is that you have a choice, right? You have a choice in terms of the, let's say, AWS, GCP, Azure. One might want to go with Azure because if they're already doing business with Microsoft, they might be getting better pricing. Now, as far as the pricing is concerned, there is one set of pricing that people like you and me can see from the internet, and then there's another set of pricing that Microsoft will be offering, corporations that are using Azure at a very massive scale. So price factor is definitely one case where people look into it. In addition to that, Azure has an amazing AI capability model. So when we talk about AI 900, we'll be talking about Azure services. Certain Azure services are so good and they're so well integrated with other Microsoft products. Let me give you an example. I think it was back in 2018. I was working with a startup back in India, and we developed a solution that was taking the attendance of the employee as soon as they enter the organization. So it was a very small gate to enter the office. And what people used to do is they used to first have their fingerprints, and that was a quite time-taking process, because when we had 15, 20 employees come together and there was just one machine for the fingerprint, the process used to be a little slow. So how we changed that was, we had CCTV cameras. We just replaced them with some special cameras that were sending the feed to our machine. We had registered the facial images of all the employees on the Azure image services, on Azure face services, face recognition. And the moment people walked in, their face was captured. We took the X, Y, top, bottom coordinate so that we could extract the face out of the entire image. We ran it against the Azure cloud, and just within a very low latency, just within a fraction of a second, we could get the result that, oh, this face seems similar, so let's see, this is Javesh. So and then it'll be triggered in the database, and then my attendance will be marked. So a lot of automation around Azure. Okay, so I'm just seeing the questions. I think it's all good. So someone has asked me a question saying that, what is the significance of 900 in AI 900? Now that's what the naming is, right? So when you talk about Microsoft, they came up with this naming. The lower the number, the higher the level of certification. So they have, AZ-900, and then they have certifications of 300 series, 500 series, 100 series. So it's just the naming convention. AZ stands for Azure, so it's the fundamental certification. 900 is the fundamental series. There's no significance behind that. Okay, so again, coming back to the reason why people would use Azure over the others would be that Azure is backed by Microsoft, and most of the companies are using Microsoft in a corporate environment. So that makes Azure a very good choice. Obviously, there are pay-as-you-go subscription. The pricing is much lower. Again, now talking from a practical standpoint of view, for certain services, one might want to go with Azure, someone might want to go with GCP, someone might want to go with AWS, because when we do the comparison, and again, that's beyond the scope of the workshop, so I won't dig in too deep into that. And that's why these days we're using hybrid cloud. So companies are like, okay, now I've heard a lot of marketing information. You say you are the best. You say you are the best. You say you are the best. So I might just use one service from here, one service from here, one service from here, whatever is the cheapest for me. And then I might use a solution called as hybrid cloud, where we are not dependent upon one, where we're using multiple services to get our job done. Okay, so not going deep into that, but yeah, the major reason that I feel that people go for Azure is the Microsoft environment, because it's so tightly backed up, and a lot of a lot of developers are already seasoned. They already know about how the technology works. Now, I think this is pretty much about what I wanted to discuss with the introduction, and now let's dig in straight into the topics. So when we talk about the fundamentals, you can see that these are the basics, right? Now, these are the necessary tools that you need to get started with Azure. why would someone want you to have a AZ-900 certification? With the AZ-900 certification, it proves that, you have what it requires to get started with cloud. So you might not be an expert, because then from here on, the expert category starts. You need specialization in different, let's say different domains, and they have certifications for that. But this is a generic certification. Here they'll be talking about three major services. So again, let me come back to my draw.io, and this time it's going to be relatively quicker. There it is. So this service that I was talking about was virtual machine, right? So this is the virtual machine where people can actually host their websites. They can host their APIs. They could be, maybe let's just say hosting a software as a service solution, or it could just be a simple virtual machine that people are using to access their workloads, or use it as a secondary machine for the RAM it offers to you, right? You could have a, like, let's say if you want to do some graphic designing, you do not want to buy a very high-end machine immediately. You want, let's say, maybe 64 GB RAM, and your base machine is running 8 GB RAM. You could just spin up a quick virtual machine, and then you could be using that very same virtual machine to, uh, do the job, and then save it, and then decommission the machine. So let's say out of my 24-hour day, only 1 hour is what I require a 64 GB RAM to perform that graphic designing job. I can spin up a virtual machine, use that machine. Within that machine, I can run the workload. And then once my job is done, I destroy the machine so that I just pay for that one specific hour. Okay. Another category of service that we would be talking about, which is very major, and I'm talking in terms of what do they expect. If you say that, Azure, these categories should be very clear to you. So first is the virtual machine, or it is also called as the compute category, where you're doing computation. The second one is the storage category. So this is the place where you are storing data. Now, let me give you an example. For example, uh, let's say all of you here have to be issued certificates, right? And we want to give you PDF files that you want to download. So obviously we could mail them to you, but then let's say if we want to store them to our record, we would not be having, again, I know Google Drive is a free option, but commercially, let's say, there's a limit to it, right? You cannot just have unlimited storage in Google Drive for free. So thinking beyond the free, if you have to have some storage, Azure can provide you some very great storage solutions where you could be storing data, in form of, let's just say, archives. So some data that you want to access very infrequently, some data in the hot tier that you want to access very frequently, something in the cold tier that you might want to access maybe once in a few months. So these are storage classes. Again, we'll talk about them later, but just to give you an idea. So storage is a category of service where they are not giving you RAM, they're not giving you disk, network. So they're not giving you control over all these things. Ultimately, the machine that is running them, or the server that is running them, has all of it. But the only thing that you pay for over there is the amount of storage. Obviously, you will be paying for how frequently you access the data, and storage classes and stuff. But basically, in simple terms, if we talk about the basics, we are only paying for the storage. So maybe as less as a few cents per month per GB. And this is also called as object storage, right? So for example, I'll say folders, files, low cost storage on demand. So you just, whenever you need it, you can spin up a category of services. Now, the reason I say category, because, these days the requirements are going so vast that people are actually, optimizing their cost. No one wants to pay a very huge sum to the cloud, right? So for that very reason, they have multiple services that offer the same thing. So first category, as I said, is compute, where you can do the computation related workloads. Second category is going to be storage, where you can store your data. Again, for different type of data, they have different categories. And again, we talk about them later. Third, and one of the most famous category of service is database services. Again, you have a wide variety. You have NoSQL database, you have SQL databases, you have relational database management systems. You can have MySQL, you can have Postgre, you can have SQL Server, a lot of variety of software available. But again, to talk about the category, this is the database category of services. Other than this, there are AI, machine learning, identity and access management. The list goes on and on and on. But basically, if you say that you are if you're clear with Azure fundamentals, an individual will expect that you know what these services are, you know what are the options in these services, and maybe at least for this workshop we'll do the practical as well. So at the end of the workshop, you'll have one compute machine, we'll work with one storage service, at least we'll work with at least one database solution, so that you can say that now you know how to host a website, you know how to run a database on cloud, you know how to store some files or run a static website on the storage service. And then again, there is a lot of fancy things that are coming up, like function as a service, where you're only running a part of your code. So you're like, okay, I don't want to control everything. Just this is my code, run it for me, charge me per, number of times, number of cycles that you run the code for. So, but like when you say that you are AZ-900 certified, the three major categories that you're looking to gain knowledge on is compute, storage, and database. Everyone good? You could use the reaction feature on Zoom, just to be, just to let me know if everyone is understanding everything. Okay, I see quite a few thumbs up. Thank you so much. Let's get back. So as I said, you guys will have to be a little patient before I can, start with the practical stuff. Again, I do not want to just rush into the practicals without you knowing what things are and how they work. Now, this is by far one of the most important topic that we are starting with, and that's why I kept it to be the first topic. It's going to be asked in the exam for sure. It's called the shared responsibility model. Okay, I'll be talking more about that, but please listen to me very, very carefully. I'll be referring to an image on the internet from the official Azure documentation. But before I refer to it, let me tell you what is the shared responsibility model. Trust me, it's very, very important because it's definitely asked in the AZ-900 certification. So Microsoft is responsible for infrastructure security. For example, in shared responsibility, Microsoft is like, you own some part of the responsibility and we own some part of the responsibility. Tomorrow, let me give you an example. You host your website, you want your website to be secure, you need to be responsible. And obviously, Microsoft needs to be responsible as well, because ultimately you have some sort of, you have some sort of control over how things work out. For example, let Ruchika, can you help me with Sad? Do you have something? You're unmuted. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, coming back. So in shared responsibility model, you share some responsibility with Microsoft. So you cannot blame Microsoft if something goes wrong. Microsoft cannot blame you if something goes wrong. For example, a physical attack, a cyber attack, a denial of service, a moment when you cannot access your website. So things like that, right? So now these happen because certain things are managed by the customer. By customer means someone who's working on the cloud, and certain things are managed by Microsoft, who is the provider of the cloud. So things like physical security. Now, since it's cloud, it is not the physical infrastructure that you can see. You're just clicking and it's creating a virtual infrastructure. You're just accessing it. You can obviously not manage the physical security, right? I hope everyone understands this. Physical security is, for example, let me give an example. Let me find something around me. Okay. Let's say if this disk is a part of the cloud, okay? If it is connected to the cloud, and this is just a very hypothetical example to explain you the situation. So I am paying to use this disk. If someone goes into the Microsoft data center and steals away this disk, this is not my responsibility because I am not someone who's managing it. I'm not someone who can control it. Hence, in the shared responsibility model, physical security, physical data centers are covered by Microsoft. Does that make sense? Give me a thumbs up. Okay. Now, networking. Obviously, Microsoft is taking care of the network, right? Let's say, just giving you an example. We know that AT&T is a provider of internet, Bell is a provider, Virgin is a provider. We could be going for Videotron is a provider of internet services. I'm not sure what Microsoft is using, right? But let's say if they are using Rogers or Bell or maybe, some other vendor, and the vendor has an outage. In that case, that's not my problem. Network, because I cannot physically connect the infra, right? Microsoft is taking care of that for me. So the responsibility of networking is always the responsibility of Microsoft, right? So it's shared responsibility. Coming to the host operating system, I am not installing Windows for them. I'm not installing Linux for them. I choose what I want, but the operating system, the base operating system image is handled by Microsoft team, right? So Microsoft is responsible for the operating system. Anything that you do not have control over is not your responsibility. Anything that you have control over, for example, you need to secure your application. For example, if I am creating a website and I'm keeping the username as admin and password as password, is Microsoft responsible for my website getting hacked? No, it's my fault, right? If I am creating a website, I need to have rules so that people cannot use a username of admin and password of password. If there is no password complexity, if there is no, let's say any hardcore rule, that makes things very, very difficult, right? Does that make sense? Yes, Mohammed, you can ask your question.
Sir, thank you for giving me the floor. Like, if I want to install an application where the OS is responsibility of Microsoft, and after some years, there is a version, updated operating system version, and on which version my application will not work. So in that situation, and I am not going to update my application. So if any compromisation happen in operating system vulnerability, so what will be the, who will be responsible for this?
Okay, so now this is a very tricky question. I'll tell you why. You installed your application on a particular operating system, and this is where we'll have to understand the difference between IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. So when you are looking for IaaS, that is infrastructure as service, you are telling Microsoft that I want you to have this virtual machine for me. You choose the operating system. When you are choosing the operating system, Microsoft cannot update it for you, right? Because you are the one who has selected that operating system. So if you are in that model where you chose your operating system and you did not update it, then for that particular scenario, if you ask me who is going to update it, it's the user. If you go for a PaaS or platform as a service model, in that model, you are telling Microsoft that, hey, this is my code. I want my code running on Python, but I am not worried what the operating system is. In that case, Microsoft is responsible for the operating system. In SaaS, that is software as a service, if you're just using a software, it is totally the responsibility of Microsoft to handle the operating system. Does that answer your question, Mohammed?
Yes, sir.
So basically, I'm just going to go to the diagram. That it basically depends on the model that you are using. You choose what is the level of updates that, or the level of control you give Microsoft or your cloud provider to choose. If you have full control, you need to make sure that you're updating everything. If they have the control, they need to make sure that the updates are happening. But let's say if you have an operating system of choice and there is a vulnerability in that operating system, obviously Microsoft cannot back that up, right? Let's say if you're using Linux and tomorrow there's a 0-day attack, some new vulnerability that comes up in Linux, no one's actually responsible for it. It is something which will come back to you because Microsoft cannot control it. So everything that Microsoft can control is their responsibility. Everything that you can control is your responsibility. It depends upon which model you choose to deploy your service on if Microsoft does the updates or you do the update. Does that make sense? Yes, I'm just going to come to IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS once I open the diagram once again, don't worry. And before that, I have a question. So you mean if I have some confidential data, it is my responsibility to protect them and it is not Microsoft's responsibility? This is an example of shared responsibility. Absolutely. If you have some shared data, if you have some critical data, you need to encrypt it, right? Microsoft will make sure that they are doing the encryption on their end, but you cannot let's say you upload something on the storage service and you make it publicly accessible over the internet. Microsoft cannot do anything about it because it was your data. You did the change. You clicked that I want it to be public. Their responsibility will be that nothing gets stolen from their data center. Does that make sense, Taib? Okay. Coming to Manmeet's question, if I am using only the storage or compute service from Azure and haven't taken additional network service, then will Azure give firewall and other network protection to my storage resources? Okay, so now, Manmeet, that's a very interesting question. Now it boils down to when you have a resource in cloud, and we'll talk more about it later in the sessions, you have to use a VPC. That's a virtual private cloud. So when you use a virtual private cloud, you are essentially having to use some networking service, right? So uh, looking at the firewall will depend upon which service you're using. With storage service, you can use a service without any firewall. It can be totally open. If you are working on, let's say net, just a sec, Azure and haven't taken additional network service, storage or compute. Okay, now coming to compute service. Once we do the practical, it'll be more clear, but compute has a firewall by default. So if you have a virtual machine, Azure is like, hey, I'm not leaving it alone to you. You need to tell me if you want to open port 80, you want to open port 22, you want to open port 3306. So basically that is Azure telling you, you need to tell me what you want to open to the world so that you do not accidentally expose your data. Does that make sense, Manmeet?
Yes, understood. Yeah.
Okay, awesome, awesome. So let me,
Yeah, I have one question.
yep, go ahead.
Yeah. So, like you said, we have to specify a specific port in order to make sure that Microsoft is opening that port in order to make it public. But let's say if we accidentally or like by chance, if we opened a port which has some user data like confidential information, does Microsoft has like does it intimate us that this
Okay,
is
yeah.
port with the
So
confidential
this is the
information kind of a
concept.
thing?
This is the concept of security groups. So for example, when you create a virtual machine, there are multiple levels of security. That depends upon your operating system as well. For example, if you're using Windows, Windows has something called as Windows Firewall by default. On Windows Server 2022, 2016, whatever version you choose. So you need to make sure that the port is in the rules, that is in the allowed inbound or outbound rules of the operating system firewall. That's the first level of security. The second level of security is security group. So when you create a virtual machine, Microsoft will tell you, hey, by default, I'm not opening anything for you. No data is public to the world. You tell me, what do you want to open? For example, if it's a Linux box, you'll have to open port 22. Again, for those of you who have not worked on SSH Linux port 22, I'm just going to come to that in the practical. It's just to answer this question. So do not feel overwhelmed. So for example, port 22, as we were talking about, you'll have to open port 22. Microsoft will tell you port 22. You want to open it for only one IP address, or you want to open it for the entire world. So it is going to give you warning messages before you select those options on the UI, and then you can choose what ports you want to open. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks, Julius.
You're most welcome. Okay, now let me come to the diagram that I was talking about, which is very, very important on SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS. Now let me tell you what this is, okay? I'll have to give some annotation tools, so just give me a sec. Let me pull them out on Zoom. Okay, I think that is not good. This Zoom does not have annotation. Okay, you guys can see my screen. You can see the shared responsibility model.
Yes.
Yes, Julius.
Okay, awesome. Okay, no problem. I do not have the annotation tools right now. It again depends upon Zoom license, but no problem. Let me just quickly guide you through what these are. Now, on-premise is basically your own machine. Okay, your own environment. For example, if we are XYZ Concordia Corporation, we start making, we start a website for social networking for people to connect with other people. We get an on-premise server. On-premise, it is our responsibility. Everything is managed by us. So all the way from, the responsibility of information, the devices, the account identities, the infrastructure, the application, the network, OS, physical host, physical network, the data center, it is all our responsibility. in the on-premise solution. We control everything. In IaaS, that is infrastructure as service, we go to Azure. Please listen to me very carefully. I want all your attention over here for the next few minutes. Very, very important. IaaS, infrastructure as service. You go to Azure, tell them, hi, I want 1 GB RAM. I want 1 CPU. I'm looking for 30 GB of storage space. I'm looking for low networking, and please create a machine for me. Azure will be like, okay, sir, it's going to be, not very expensive for you because you requested for so and so service. But at the same time, I would like to remind you that you have to be responsible. What do you have to be responsible for? You have to be responsible for the operating system. So you see this blue color in the operating system, you are responsible for the OS, you are responsible for network, you are responsible for application and everything that comes above it. So basically, the less management Azure does for you, the cheaper it is going to be for you. So the more you manage, the cheaper it is. And this is from a very practical example. We'll talk about the pricing later. But just so that you guys know, the more work you do, it is going to be cheaper on your pocket. The more work Azure does, obviously they're going to be charging you for it. In platform as a service, you are like, hi, I want a website to be deployed. I want the website to be deployed on Python, and I want you to be using Python 3. Let's say X, like 3.6 version, just again, something hypothetical. Azure will be like, okay, I'm going to take care of the operating system. You don't tell me if you want it on Windows or Linux. I'm going to do it, right? Because you have told me you want Python 3.7 or 3.6. Now I know Python 3.6 or 3.7 works best on Linux. Example, it could be on, Windows as well. So depending upon the data with Azure, now you see in the PaaS under the operating system, it is not your responsibility to have the operating system updates. Azure is going to do it for you. Does that make sense? So shared responsibility in IaaS, infrastructure as a service, it is your infra. So since it's Azure infra, but it is your demand. So in that case, you do not need to worry about the physical stuff. That is always taken care by Azure. But you need to be worried about the operating system, network, application, and structure, identity structure. In PaaS, you do not need to worry about operating system at all because that is done by Azure. But network controls are controlled by you. If you go and tell Azure that you want to open this port, they will open it for you, right? So if you do a misconfiguration, it is 50-50 responsibility. So Azure will make sure that they are not doing anything what you have not asked them to do, and you have to make sure that you are asking them the right thing to be done. Okay, so it's a shared responsibility for network, for application, for identity and directory infrastructure. It's totally shared, right? So then moving to software as a service. And obviously, the accounts, device, and information is yours. Reason being, if you create a website, even if you're using a software, whatever you are doing, if for example, I gave you that example, right? If my username is Devesh and my password is password, Azure cannot help me. No one can help me with that, right? Because that's my mistake to keep such an easy password. So you cannot keep the car keys in the car and say that your car got stolen, right? In that case, it's not your responsibility, because if you have the keys in, you are making it very, very vulnerable to, someone stealing that vehicle or someone making some harm in your application. And that's why it's shared responsibility. In software as a service model, where you are like, hey, I want to use Microsoft 365. I want to use Word online. I want to use PowerPoint online. I am not the best experience. So please handle the operating system. Please handle the language. Just give me the software. And when you only ask for the software, you are responsible for the account. So let's say if I am taking software as a service solution and I create an account for, let's say, Ruchika, and Ruchika leaves the organization and I forget to delete the account. Tomorrow, if my data is hacked and she's not a part of my organization, who do you think is going to be, whose responsibility is? Not Azure, obviously, right? So you need to have governance over the account. You need to have governance over the devices. You need to have governance over the data. So you need to be sure that these things are in your control. But the other responsibilities are taken care by Azure. Does everyone understand this? If not, you can raise your hand and we'll talk more. Okay, So someone has said you can explain the shared responsibility again. Just coming to that. Give me a minute. Okay. Let me explain this once again. So let me go step by step. On premise is on your premise. You are responsible for everything. You take care of the physical data center, physical network, physical host, OS, network, applications, and the entire series. In IaaS or infrastructure as a service, you are responsible for everything other than the physical, because you can never see the physical. So these three models are for the cloud: SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS, right? So you can never be responsible for physical because that is taken care by the cloud service provider. Talking about the operating system, if you have IaaS where you are like, hey, I want to create a Linux machine, so it's your responsibility for the operating system because you are instructing Azure to do that particular action. In platform as service, you are telling Azure that, hey, Azure, I have this application which runs on Python. Take, my code and you deploy it for me. So in that case, it is shared, right? They will take care of the hardware. They will take care of the operating system as well, because you have told them you want Python. Python can run on Windows. Python could also be running on, let's say, if it's not Windows, it could be running on Linux. So Azure does the decision making for you, whatever works out best according to them. So that's why that is their responsibility. Networking, application, and identity is shared. So by shared, I mean, for example, Azure makes sure that your commands are followed. You make sure that you're giving the right command. For example, let's say if you tell them that please use Python 2.7 example, and I know there's nothing very prominent wrong with 2.7. People do use Python 2 as well. So let's say if someone goes and says, I want to use an application on Python 2.7. Tomorrow there's a vulnerability that develops over 2.7. It is not Azure's responsibility for the vulnerability, it's shared. Azure will make sure that it has the right version that you ask for, and it's your responsibility that you ask for the right version. So, it's shared. Does that make sense? I think Vishal, you asked this question. Shared responsibility. Both of them have to take care. You have to be updated with the market standard that yes, this is a secure version. So you need to do your research, because again, they are just listening to you, right? They cannot automatically update. If they update it and your application does not work, you're going to blame them for it. So this is shared. In terms of software as a service, everything is taken care by Azure. You just handle the account. The shared responsibilities, identity and directory infra. So they will make sure that they have the right user account management systems. You make sure that you create the right users in the account. You give them the right privileges. They'll make sure that they give you ample of solutions or ample of possibilities where you can, give someone read access, write access, or controlled access. And you have to be sure that uh, that you are going with the right configuration. You are not making any unauthorized changes. You're not asking for something that is insecure, because intentionally, if you use something which is old, you cannot be blaming them for that. So this is what a shared responsibility model. Any questions on this? Because definitely in the exam, they'll be asking you questions. And don't worry on day 3, because the content is planned in such a way. I know the beginning is a little slow because, we're getting to know the concept, but as we pace up, in the end, I'm going to give you some sample exam questions, which are asked in the exam, and it's all going to be based upon this. And these entire slides will be shared with you along with all the, links and stuff, so that you can access them, you can read them at your own time. But here in the workshop, what's important for you is to ask your questions and understand the concepts. So, okay, any questions around this? Okay, so the question is application file uploaded by Azure in SaaS and PaaS? Okay, so the difference between SaaS and PaaS, let me explain it one more. Okay, I think I might want to go to draw.io now. Reason being, since you guys are asking this and this is kind of important, I do not want to skip it. I hope you guys can see my draw.io. So we were just talking about the category of services that we'll be discussing. So database, storage, and compute. These are the 3 major categories. A lot of stuff here. This will not go down. Okay. I'm just I'll just let this be on the right then. Okay, so some people write, direct questions to me, so you might not all be seeing them in the chat. So the question is, who takes care of the application files in SAS? So let me just, have a very simple demonstration. So if you look at this compute service, I'm just going to move these two because we didn't do anything much with them anyways. Okay. And this is the third one. Okay. So let's talk about IaaS, and these are all compute, right? So IaaS, compute. This is SAS compute, and I'll share these with you so that you can use them. SAS compute, and trust me, this is a very important concept. If you understand this, you would be good with quite a few questions in the exam. So in IaaS, you are like, you control this, right? You control the RAM, you control the disk. That means you tell Azure that this is the RAM I want, this is the size of disk I want, this is the networking capability I want. You select the operating system, you select the programming language, and you have your own source code. So this is your responsibility in IaaS. You just tell them that you want a compute service and you decide whatever is there. They don't do anything for you. Okay. So this is all your responsibility. Now, in PaaS, you do not need to worry about RAM, disk, network, and operating system. This is all the I'll just use a different color. So this is all the responsibility of Azure. You just tell them that this is the application that you're looking for. In fact, not even the programming language. So you do not worry about all of this. You just tell them what you want. They do it all for you. All you need to manage is your source code. So the application remains your in platform as a service. In software as a service, it is all managed by Azure. You're just using the application. So whatever you do it on top of the application. For example, creating user accounts and stuff of that sort. Obviously, what is not shown over here is physical security, making sure that the infrastructure is secure. That is always taken care by Azure itself. So let me have another block where we can mention things like physical security, power supply, infra security. So, and I'll just give you an example of all three of them. So this is always managed for all of them by Azure itself. So let me give you a very quick example. When you look into this model in infrastructure as service, you are having control. That means you tell Azure that this is the RAM I want, this is the disk I want. And by disk, I mean, let's say HDD, SSD, the size of the disk, and things of that sort. You select the network, you can tell them you want Linux or you want Windows, or which version of Linux or which version of Windows. So you control all of them. In PaaS, you are just telling them that the programming language or the platform needs to be, Python, PHP, whatever it is. So you can say this is kind of more like shared. They handle the latest version, they handle the versioning, you handle which platform you want, and then you also handle the source code. So I could say this is programming language. Installing the programming language is their job. Telling them what to install is yours. Does that make sense to all of you? Yeah. So to answer your question, all the slides, all the images, all the draw.ios, everything will be shared with all of you. You do not need to worry about any of it. I'll be doing that. For the video, I'm not 100% sure. I'm being very optimistic that the video would record. I'll try my level best, but no assurance on the video. But don't worry, these slides and the documentation, like the slides that are there, I'm not reading through them, but they're very detailed. So when you read them, you'll be able to understand the concept. And these concepts are mentioned in the slides. Okay, so I'm just giving you an explanation. And now when we go through the slides, so don't worry that we have just covered a few. We'll just be very fast with the slides because we've already covered these concepts, right? So Okay, Bhargav, what's your question? Source code is something you want to run on the computer? No. Let me explain. If we want to run a website, okay, I would be writing some source code. For example, let me give an example of source code. So I might be writing some Python file. Along with this Python file, I might be writing another file which might be on HTML. Now I want some styling on top of it. So I want some CSS as well. And this is for a website, right? I might want to write some front end. So I might be writing some JavaScript. So this, when I combine all of this, like this is my, code, the code that I've written is my source code, right? I want this source code to be, this is the work that I've done. This is the code of the website that I've written, and I want it to be accessed by the world. So obviously you are going to write your source code. And let me write that this is the source code. So this is your source code. You will upload it on IAS. At the end of the day, you'll also upload it on PaaS. In PaaS, it's like you will go to Azure, you will tell them, hi, I have a website that is running on Python, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Here is the zip file of my source code. Can you please create a machine for me and host it for me? So Azure will be like, okay, why not? Let me take care of the RAM, disk, network, operating system. You just give me the code. You tell me what programming language you want. I'll install it for you and we are good to go. In IAS, you need to install from the operating system. And if this is not very clear, it will get more clear when we do the practical in the second half, or maybe tomorrow, depending upon what we cover today. So when we create a first virtual machine, we'll do it in IaaS. That's going to be where we tell what's the RAM we want to use, what's the disk we want to use, and we'll have control over all these things. Does that answer your question? So in one last line, if I have to explain this to all of you, and then I want you to be, giving me a thumbs up at the end if you understand this. IaaS, let me write the full forms for you as well so that you can access it later. Infrastructure as a service. So if you hear the term infrastructure as a service, that means you can select everything. They'll give you a machine where you do everything. You tell them you want Windows, they'll install Windows for you. Everything else is your responsibility. Okay, so you will decide each and everything and it'll be done. In PaaS, in platform as a service, let me mention that. You're like, hi, I want to create a website, which is the code is written on Python. So I'm giving you the source code, but you can create the machine for me. You can do the operating system stuff. You can install PHP for me. Or Python for me. I do not want to do the headache of doing all those three things. So they're like, okay, we'll do it for you. Just tell us what programming language you want or which platform you want. And not to confuse you. So programming language is basically the platform. I'm just using simple terms because some people might not understand platform, but I hope programming language everyone understands. So, but the technical term is platform over here. Okay. And then last is software as a service. You do not write any source code. So in software as a service, you're like, hey, I want to use a software that you've hosted on your solution. So for example, an example of software as a service would be using Microsoft Office 365, using, Google Docs or something of that sort, where you are not writing the software. You don't write the software. You're just the consumer of the software. Now, does this make sense to all of you? If it does, I want a thumbs up from the reaction in Zoom. Just want to see how many of you are active here. And if anyone still has a question, let's take it up in the break. Okay. One last time I'll explain just SaaS and then we'll be good to go. So for SaaS is software as a service. Let me open it for you. Let's say Google Docs, okay? So if I open Google Docs, again, if I click on this blank, you can see that I am using a software, right? But I did not install this. I can do things like I can create a new file, I can write some data, I can download, I can email, I can print it, I can maybe write, Google Docs. And then Google Docs is an example of SaaS because I did not write code to create Google Docs. I am just a user of I think now it makes sense. So simple. This is Google Docs. I can do operations like, center align, bold, italics, underline. It's a full-fledged software. Now you see, I can do changes in the software. It's an example of software as a service. I did not install this application on my machine. Let's go back to the first definition. Cloud. Cloud is not your machine. It is just someone else's computer. It started as a joke, this phrase, but if you understand this, it's very deep, and it will make your understanding of cloud much better. So if you talk about Google Docs, it is software as a service because you did not install it, you did not create the application, you're just a user, and this is running on the cloud. So since it's running on someone else's computer, it is an example of software as a service. Vishal, go ahead, ask your question.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, like, I got the idea that I'm a user of this service, of this
Yes.
software, Google Docs.
Yes.
So my question is, like, this, I'm the user, like, I'm on the other hand, like, the software is the creator is the Google, right?
Yeah.
And the creator goes to the cloud service, like the Microsoft Azure or something like that.
Yes. Yes.
So for in that place, like the source code is written, like, is managed by the creator, right?
Yes.
And
And that's
here
why it's
you
in
have,
purple. You see, we only write the source code for IaaS and PaaS. For SaaS, the source code is written by the cloud service provider. We are just a consumer. We are using the software. We did not create Google Cloud. We are just writing our documents, right? So not to get confused with Google, this is one example of software as a service. You have so many examples of software as a service. So some might be applications that you can see in the browser where you can create documents, and others might be applications that might help you run. For example, the software that I'm using, draw.io, it's allowing me to use a lot of colors, drawings, things that I'm using. I did not write the code for draw.io, but since I did not install it and I'm using this application, this is a software running in the cloud, and we are just the consumers. We are not editing the source code of draw.io. We are not editing the source code of Google Docs. We are just editing a document. Does that answer your question, Vishal?
yeah, like partially, but I will still like wait for the practical.
Ask again. Let me try it one more time.
My understanding is that whatever you diagram this made
Yeah.
is the interaction between the, like, a software creator or whatever, the application creator and the cloud service, not the end user. So I'm seeing like a between, this is a cloud service, and to the left side, like, we are creators, like something like a company, startup company, something. On
Yes.
the right
Yes.
side is the user.
Yes.
But as a user, I will never have the source code, right? Like, unless and until the startup company gives an permission.
Okay. I'll answer your question. I got your point. Now, whatever is marked in purple is not editable by you. You just give the instructions. So software as a service is a category of services where you go to the software provider, you tell them that I do not want to install this, I just want to consume your service. So you will be the end user in that case. The entire product, whatever product it is not like, this is not something where we are working as developers. Software as a service is a consumer-based model. So everyone becomes a consumer for software as a service because you go and you tell them that, hey, this is what I want as a consumer. Does that answer your question?
Okay, yeah, I'm getting an idea.
So
Yeah.
everyone is a consumer in SaaS. You do not do anything. For example, if I go to Microsoft, I tell them I want D365 or I want, Microsoft Office 365. They will tell me, okay, pay this money, create an account. You can create other accounts under your name and under your organization name, and everyone can use the service. So everyone becomes a consumer in SaaS. Only in IaaS and PaaS, you can write your own code and deploy to the cloud.
Okay. So it's like basically in SaaS we have to just pay the money.
Yes, you just have to pay the money and you have to consume the service. You cannot make changes to it.
Okay. 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 I got it. Yeah. Thanks.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Okay.
Sivesh.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Pranay. Yeah,
Yes.
so in SaaS, it's basically they already developed the application. We already have the application. We just pay for the service and we use
Yes.
that service.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And in the IaaS and PaaS, we give the requirement as a source code and we get whatever we require from that.
So
Like in
cloud.
IaaS, it's basically everything.
Yes.
We have to manage, and PaaS, it's basically we give the source code and we give the language, and the rest assured, like the network operating system and rest of the
Yes.
stuff is assured by the Azure, right?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
got it. Got it.
So
Thanks.
this is where, and let me clarify this one more time for all of you. Cloud is a hosting solution. It is a provider. It is an infrastructure solution. So basically you go to cloud with your own code. If you are going with your own code, you are consuming either IaaS or PaaS. So they're helping you host your, by providing you the infrastructure. In SaaS, they have done their own work. They have their own infra. You are like, hey, I just want to consume your service. So that's the major difference. Now the difference between IaaS and PaaS would be IaaS, you have more control because you choose that this is my code. I wanted to run it on this machine. I want to run it on this operating system. This is the amount of RAM I want, and I will do all the management on my own. And in PaaS, you're like, this is my code. I do not know anything else. The only thing I have is this code. You do the management for me. I want it to be running on Python. Just one last question that I see in the chat. Source code is some code written in a file like Notepad, and it can be run in some platform or programming language like Python. Am I right? Absolutely correct. So a source code will be, if I write a Python script, I write a HTML script, I write some CSS script. So whatever code you write, you can be writing it in VS Code, you can be writing it in IntelliJ, you can be writing it in Notepad++, or even Notepad. These are just the programming language files. So this is like, this is what we call coding or some code that we have written. So we have just written this code, we want to deploy it. The reason why people are looking for cloud solutions, development is done, right? A lot of people are developing. But when you want to host it, when you want your code to be available for the entire world, that's when you use a cloud solution provider. So I think I've talked quite a lot about this. And again, as I said, this will all be shared with you. So you don't need to worry about that. Let me come back to sharing the presentation where we were. So I hope this shared responsibility is clear to all of you. If it's not, don't worry. In the next 30 minutes, we're going to have a first break, and then, you guys can ask me doubts if you still have any. Now talking about on-premise. Now, as I said, we are going to be very fast with the slides because we've already discussed these concepts. So an on-premise data center is a physical facility owned and operated by an organization where they can store and manage their data. So basically, it is you are the one who's responsible for everything on-premise. Okay. So as the definition says, on-premise data centers provide organization with greater control and customization, but require more resources and maintenance than cloud solutions. Here, I will introduce a very important concept. Please listen to me very carefully. CapEx, OpEx. And I'm just going to be writing about them as well. Code is uploaded by both parties. Is it right? I'm just going to come answer your question in a while, AKM. Since it's a direct message, I'll just read out the question. So it says, in PaaS, software code is uploaded by both parties? No, I'm just going to be talking about that when we talk about PaaS now. So I'll just pause that answer. So just hold on. Your question will be answered in a while. But now, before I go any further, there's one thing that I want you to know, that is CapEx and OpEx. Please understand it's a very financial term and it's very, very critical. Again, a question very commonly asked in the exam. I'll be sharing it in the notes that I share with you. So CapEx is capital expense. And OPEX is operational. And you'll understand this very clearly in just a while. Let me give you an example. You buy your on-premise solution, right? You buy everything on the on-premise. You are paying for everything upfront. That is capital expenditure. You're spending a lot of money on buying the infrastructure, but you don't need to pay someone again and again. In simple words, CapEx versus OPEX. Even before I go to this, I would want you to, I'll just stop sharing my screen so that I can explain this, because I'm going to be using just some signs to explain. CapEx is like you buying a property. I'm new to Montreal. I want to live in Montreal. I can either buy a house. If I buy a house, the cost of maintenance is low. The cost of buying a house is high. A lot of capital expense, but every month I'm paying very less money. So very little operational expense. Compare this to a cloud model, which is leasing. Now I'm like, I want to lease an apartment. I do not need to pay any high amount upfront. I'm just paying operationally as I'm consuming. Does that make sense? CapEx versus OPEX. Capital expenses, you pay a lot of money at once and then very little cost to maintain it. In operational expense, you do not buy. You are like, okay, I just want to consume it. You lease it out, you rent it out, you pay for the usage. Obviously, it's, I won't say one is better over the other. I'll give you an example why. The reason I'm giving you the housing industry model, for example, if I'm sure, because obviously the other party is earning as well, right? If I'm leasing out a house for a very long period of time, it might be cheaper to buy it in the long run, but I might not have that kind of money right now. So there's no better answer to if CapEx is better or OPEX is better. The answer is it depends. It depends upon your usage. If you know you are going to have a requirement for a 16 CPU machine with 32 GB RAM throughout the year, and you're 100% sure the requirement is not going, I mean, no one can be 100% sure in technology, but you are very, very sure that that requirement is not going to change for the next few years, you might want to buy it because it might be cheaper than going on a lease for it, right? But if you're not sure, tomorrow I might have 10 users, I might have 100. Day after tomorrow, it might drop to maybe 1, and then maybe I might have 10,000. So if you're so uncertain, you're like, I would prefer to lease it out, right? I'll just pay as it goes. So the advantage in that case will be you do not need to worry. Your risk is kind of minimized. So CapEx is capital expense, OPEX is operational expense. With cloud, you have minimum capital expenditure because you're not buying the hardware, but and you have operational expenditure, so you're paying continuously. On premise, you're going to have very high capital expense, but your operation expense will be low. Does that answer your question? It's not a question. Is the concept clear to all of you? CapEx versus OPEX? Okay, awesome. Let me go back to the slides. Okay. So as we talk about on-premise, the CapEx is going to be high, the operational expense is low, because capital as it is, capital expense, operational expense. Capital means you pay more at once, but then the cost of running it is low. And then operational, like when we come to the cloud model from on-premise, IaaS, PaaS or SaaS, you have operational expense, but then your capital expense is very, very low. Now coming to what are your responsibilities on an on-premise solution. When you talk about an on-premise solution, you have the responsibility of physical data center. So you manage your own physical data center. Wait, if you have an on-premise, the operational expense is also high, no? Khalid, now that depends upon the scale. For example, if you have, again, 1,000 servers or 10,000 servers, in that case, your OPEX might be low than having 10,000 leased out machines, right? But if you just have 1 machine, 2 machine, 5 machine, 10 machine, in that case, obviously OPEX is also going to be high. But naturally, if you're talking about a big scale organization, a large scale organization, which is spending a few $100,000 a year, at least on their cloud budget. And I am aware about organizations that use, a lot of money. They have a huge cloud spending budget. Not going into those details for now, just giving you guys a, rough level overview. Generally, again, I'm using the term generally because it depends on use case to use case. With on-premise, the operational cost is low because you're not paying a rent, right? You have already bought the device. Now, obviously, if it's just one device, it's very difficult to maintain it. But if it's thousands of devices, in that case, it gets naturally cheaper or low on cost to maintain. So operational expense goes low. Okay. Yeah. Now coming to what are the responsibilities in on-premise. Again, this is not very difficult. Please understand this. And again, once you have these slides, once you review them, you'll understand everything. You manage the data center, basically you manage everything in on-premise, right? Data center is the place where it is installed. You need to make sure no one just comes in and unplugs your devices, steals your devices, or you need to be sure that no one floods the system, or anything could go wrong. And when we talk about Azure further, you'll understand what could probably go wrong. So in the chat, OpEx is minimum op cost, minimum in on-premise, yes. Running day to day. CapEx more on-premise, buying initially, yes. CapEx less on cloud, OpEx high on cloud. Absolutely correct. Yes. So capital expense is less on cloud and operational is high. And again, saying that generally because again, scale comes into play. But in general, CapEx is low on cloud. You're just paying, as you go. So pay as you go service is operational expenses high. Okay. So physical data center, sorry.
Jivesh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry for interrupting. I have one question regarding CapEx and OpEx. So in the cloud, CapEx is relatively low and OpEx, the operational cost is high, but I don't understand like what would be the capital expense, because like we just pay for what we use, right? That would completely be the operational expense and no capital expense, right?
No, I'll tell you why. Because again, cloud is not as straightforward as it seems, because if it were, we would not need so many people in the field of cloud computing. So the pricing is not so straightforward. They give you so many options in pricing. They'll be like, okay, you want to totally use on demand, this is the price I'll give you. You want to reserve for 1 year, this is the price I'll give you. You want to reserve for 3 years, this is the price I'll give you. You want to have a spot instance, you want to bet, like, for example, you only want
like
to
savings plan kind of a thing.
Yeah. So the payment plans are so different. So you cannot say that the CapEx is zero. Depending upon your scenario, you might have CapEx. But in general, if you're using on demand, your CapEx is zero. You're just paying for the services that you're using. Make sense?
Yeah, I just want to know that. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. What is the meaning of physical host? So physical host is having a physical system. For example, I can't find a machine next to me, but yeah, let's say if I have a server, a very small server, and people are using it, it's a physical host. It's a physical device. If I'm having virtual machines and I'm dividing that physical server into 5 or 6 VMs so that 5 or 6 people could be using it at the same time, that's a virtual host. Bhargav, answers your question? Okay, awesome. Let me go back. Did I share the wrong screen? Yeah, there we are. Okay, so as I was talking about on-premise, so on-premise, basically everything is a responsibility of the of the user. If you have something on-premise, it's your data center, your network, your host. That means your machine, your computer, like the physical server that you have, your own choice of operating system, your own networking controls. What will be allowed, what will not be allowed, the applications, the accounts, identity and infrastructure, information and data. Everything is your responsibility. Exam point of view, what is the responsibility of Azure on on-premise? Zero, nothing. What is your responsibility? What is the client's responsibility on on-premise? Everything. Make sense? Simple trick, right? On-premise, since it's not on the cloud, zero responsibility of Azure, all responsibility of the user. Make sense, guys? Okay. Now we've already talked about all of this, and you're going to have, as I said, you have, everything on. Not exactly. Not to answer your question, Pranav. Not exactly. If I compare at IaaS and on-premise, the physical responsibility in IaaS is not of the cloud. And again, as we progress in the slides, you'll see what what responsibilities does IaaS have. So once I come to that, you'll understand this further. And now, since I've already explained the shared responsibility diagram, these slides are going to go a little bit easy. So as I started, I think it's just 20 minutes before the break. So please pay your entire attention to me. I want to cover these three concepts before we go. Trust me, they're very important for the exam. Close to 15% of the weightage will be from here. So on-premise is your own data center, your own office, your own computer. Responsibility of Azure, 0. Your responsibility, 100%. Infrastructure as service. You choose everything, but the physical security, so that no one goes and plugs out a machine, no one goes and destroys the machine, and no one steals the data or steals the machine. This physical security is the responsibility of Azure, whereas the other networking and operating system becomes your responsibility. Pranav, does that make sense? Because you had that question, just to clarify that.
Yeah.
Awesome. So infrastructure as a service is a cloud computing model that provides virtualized, please listen to this, virtualized computing resources over the internet. IaaS customers can rent and manage servers, storage, networking, and other computing resources from a cloud provider rather than owning and managing physical infrastructure themselves. You want something, you do not need to take care of the physical stuff. You tell the cloud service provider, this is what I want. They create the machine for you virtually. Sitting at home, by doing one click, they do it for you in the background. You just consume it. You're the mere consumer of the service. I hope this is clear. If any questions, just raise your hand. Since we've already discussed this in the diagram, now things will be, answering your doubts much easier. So IaaS scenarios, there are two scenarios which we'll talk about. So which is lift and shift migration. So which involves moving the applications and systems that are running on the premise to cloud without making any changes to the existing configuration. This approach is often used when the goal is to quickly move resources to the cloud while maintaining the same functionality. This is like, let's say if you are a company that is running on premise, because you might know cloud is a concept that was started, I think in 2006, 2008 around, gained popularity around 2013, and then it's 2023. So not all applications have still been moved, because some sectors like healthcare, some sectors like finance, some sectors like where you have critical personally identified information, they're still reluctant to use cloud. Again, first definition, cloud is not your machine, it is someone else's computer, and that scares people. People are like, oh, it is someone else's computer. Should I put my data? Should I not put my data? That's why some organizations are comparatively reluctant to move their entire data to cloud. So yet, still the technology is evolving and more people are moving to cloud. Migration is still a very big thing when it comes to cloud. If you get a job in the field of cloud, there's a very good chance that you might help an on-premise solution move to the cloud, because again, everything is not moved yet. Even though we're in 2023, still there are things that are coming up. People are still adapting to the cloud. So lift and shift migration is whatever you had on-premise, just leave your hardware, take the entire thing, put it in the cloud. Does that make sense to all of you? We're still evolving on cloud. So lift and shift is like whatever is there, just take it, put it in the cloud, and we're good to go. No changes required. Compare that to testing and development. So in this in testing and development in the cloud, it allows for creation of different environments for testing and development. So what happens is you can quickly move your workloads to test. So first you test and then you deploy, right? And then you can develop along the route. So this is like you get an IaaS infrastructure which provides complete control over the configuration and setup of these environments. This allows you for more efficient and flexible development process. So it's like you change according to the cloud, because cloud is not the same thing as on-premise. But you don't, you do it like in phases. So you're like, okay, I'll take the data, but at the same time, I'll try to use more cloud native solutions, something which works better on the cloud, right? So for example, if you have been using one database, which has been working good for you, in cloud, you might get an option to use another one, because now it's a click, right? Please understand, when you're talking about cloud, you previously, if you wanted to install a new database, you'll have to buy a new hardware. Now, if you want to test something, it's just one click. You might pay for it one day, you might test it. If it doesn't work, you destroy it, you don't pay for it any further. So development has become very rapid, and development has become very advanced with the moving of technology to cloud. And that's why it gives you that flexibility to test newer opportunities. So this is again not super important from exam standpoint of view, so I'll not spend a lot of time on it. Let's come to this. In infrastructure as service, your responsibility is operating system, network, application, identity and infrastructure, accounts and identity, and information of data. You are not taking care of physical machines. And someone asked me, what's a physical host? Physical host is the physical machine. You don't need to worry about that in infrastructure as service, because though you are controlling everything, but you are still not taking care of, like the physical infra. Azure is doing it for you, because obviously you cannot go to Azure data center and, take care of things on your own. Yes, Mohammed, go ahead.
Every application deals with customer data. So sometimes my application may hold data of customers' private PII data.
Yeah.
So there is a rules like cross-border data transfer should not be prohibited for lots of countries. So my question is how, despite of this kind of rules, this cloud application becomes so popular day by day? Because
so when we progress further throughout the session, you'll understand Azure gives you options to move your data. So you can still follow, the cloud is still compliant with a lot of regulators. So for example, if you have a rule that you only want the data to be there in your region, that's why Azure has regions throughout the world. I'll talk about that later, but they have a region, let's say in Europe, and they have one in US, they have a few in Canada. They don't have one in US, they have multiple in US. So multiple in US, multiple in Canada, something in Asia East, something in Southeast Asia, a few in Europe, so it's spread out so vastly. Now, when you have that vast spread of regions, you can still comply. So if the rule is, if let's say I am dealing with personally identified information or PII in Canada, I have options because I have two regions, right? In Canada, I have, and I've not talked about them, so I'm not going in detail, but you can still comply because they have multiple data centers, one in East, one in Central. So if they have two of them, I can make sure that some data is over here, some is over here, nothing is going out of Canada. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Now coming to platform as service, and as I said, it's not going to take a lot of time. We've already discussed this over, so it's a quick revision. Platform as a service is a cloud computing model that provides a complete platform for customers to develop, run, and manage their applications without having to worry about the underlying infra. You don't need to worry about the infra. You go to cloud with, with the code that you have written on Python, you tell them you want this deployed on Python, they're going to do it for you. Okay, you don't need to worry about installing operating system, installing Python, making sure of security and all that stuff. It's all done by them. So PaaS provides an environment with pre-built components for application development, testing, deployment, and hosting. So by pre-built components, if you look at this, PaaS provides an environment with pre-built components. They know how things work out, right? Because people have been using the service for quite some time. So you go to them, you tell them that, yeah, this is what you're looking forward for. They are automatically going to do the job for you. Does that make sense? Simple stuff. Already discussed. Again, if someone has doubts, don't worry. I'm not rushing. I've already discussed this 2 times. I'm going to take it up in the break. If someone still has a doubt, we'll solve it. PaaS has some scenarios. Again, I'll just briefly walk you through them. Not super important from the exam standpoint of view, so we'll not spend a lot of time. So PaaS scenario, the first is development framework. So PaaS as a service, platform as a service is a cloud-based service that provides developers with a framework to build and customize applications. It comes with pre-built software components and features like scalability, availability, multi-tenant capability, which reduce the amount of coding required to develop applications. So they have already done a lot for us in terms of the development framework. We can be leveraging the work that they have done. We don't need to do everything programmatically. So it helps with the development as well. Again, this is not very essential for the exam. That's why I'm not going in the details, since, I made the slides considering that, because when we are giving a presentation in live, we don't know how long it's going to take because we are answering the questions as we go. So this is, again, not super important. So that's why you can read it when you are revising just before the exam to get, a few lines of information. But again, I won't go too deep because then we might not be able to cover everything that we have planned. Going on analytics or business intelligence. So PAS also allows to provide PAS also provides tools for analytics for business intelligence, which enable organizations to analyze and mine their data. These tools help in business to find the insight and pattern in their data and make predictions to improve forecasting, design decisions, and investment returns and other important decisions. Basically, in simple words, if you're using PAS, you have two major advantages. The first one is development framework. They make your development a little easy because they have some tools which you could be leveraging and you don't need to worry about availability. For example, if you are using, let's say, let me give you a real world example so you understand this better. If you were using on-premise, the problem with on-premise would be that, just a sec. Yeah. The problem with on-premise would be that you would have to write your own code. The code would be, if the CPU utilization is above 90%, please send a request to the other server so that I do not get, so that I'm not able to serve. So this is one computer talking to another. You had to write the code so that these could talk to each other. And this is what essentially what a load balancer does. Not going in details again, but basically in simple scenario, if one server can handle 100 users, if you have 90 users already, it is going to tell the other server that please handle the remaining 90 servers or the next people, and then the third server for the next remaining. So you can have your own thresholds and stuff like that, right? But if we have more than this number of people, please route to the other server. You have to write that code. In past, you do not need to do it. You tell them, you give the code, they are automatically going to, manage the availability and scalability and things of that sort. Does that make sense? Give me a thumbs up if it does, all of you. Okay. Going on to analytics and business intelligence, PAS also gives you a solution to analyze your users. So for example, if I'm getting a lot of users on the application, I don't need to worry about them because, let's say the analytics, because people are using PAS, Azure has created a solution for us where we can be using their own business intelligence. So it can give me insights like, just giving you an example, insights like, maximum people visit your website from 9 in the morning to 5 in the evening. That will give me an idea. Okay, I have more people coming at that time. Let me start a promotion. Let me add some sale or some banners at that time so people can, get attracted and buy more stuff. So things of that sort. You can have total control. You can increase your sales, you can increase your returns, you can make your investments shine out for you by using the analytics of business intelligence. Again, you do not need to do the heavy lifting. PAS has some scenarios where it can do things for you. Talking about the responsibility, your responsibility gets even reduced. Again, remember in mind, it's getting expensive. IAS is the cheapest because you manage everything, right? You're the one who's taking care of everything. And since you are managing everything in IaaS, the thing is that it's cheaper for Azure. In PaaS, Azure needs to do some heavy lifting to do the management for you. So you are only managing the controls, application, that's your source code, information and data, accounts and identities, identity and infrastructure. So not a lot of your heavy lifting going in the background. And for considering that, not a lot of heavy lifting for the Azure going in the background. You need to take care of a lot of stuff. So that's why it is compared. I said the wrong thing. I'm so sorry. Yeah, coming back. So in past, not a lot of work for you, more work for Azure, and hence it's more expensive. Okay, make sense? Next, SaaS or software as a service. Pahar, can you elaborate your question? Do we have access to our DB?
Excuse me, my question is that, for example, let's imagine that we develop our application and on the platform that Azure provide to us, and you said that it's going to provide us some analytic and business intelligence over our data. And my question is that, for example, if I want to prepare some report based on data on my own, do I have or I don't know, change something in a database or something like this? For
No.
example, do I have access? Do I have access to a database in order to, I don't know, write a query,
I
something
get
like
the point.
this?
Okay, so no, that's not the kind of control they give you. So it's not full business intelligence. They have some tools that help you with business intelligence. So that is like, if you enable those tools, it will give you overview. It will give you a very high level overview that this was the activity, this was the utilization, this is your usage cap in terms of, it's not application data. This is the consumption data. So this data is in respect to how much your server was used, what was the maximum RAM used, how many people visited it, how many pages that they went to, but not
Got it now.
intelligence like what they entered, what they were looking at and stuff of that sort.
Okay, got it
So
now. Thank you.
that is definitely, that is also a part of business intelligence, but not with these tools because they are only, mostly concerned about things at a very broad level.
Okay, got it now. Thank you.
Most welcome. Okay. So where were we? Yep. Coming to software as a service, last thing that we have to discuss before the break, might just overspill by 2 minutes at max. So just pay attention to this. Okay. So software as a service. Software as a service is a cloud computing model that delivers software applications over the internet, allowing the customers to access them through a browser or an application. SaaS provides host and manages the software, handling all aspects of the maintenance, updates, and security for the customers. You are the mere consumer in SaaS. You go, you buy the subscription, you consume the service, and you are good to go. So you do not have any control over how the application is written. That application might help you write some data, but that is again not the source code. Does that make sense to all of you? On SaaS, you're just the consumer. So you can just access the application over the internet. You will be the consumer for this service. Now, SaaS has some scenarios that we'll discuss, for example, email and messaging. So SaaS solutions for email are, the email, for example, let's say Gmail. Again, that's a software because you could have an offline mailing software in Windows as well. So it's doing a lot of stuff for you: compose mail, view mail, delete mail, sort mail, search mail. The functionality goes on and on, right? So that is one example of a SaaS scenario. The second will be business productivity applications. So basically like CRM, if you know about them, customer relationship management, and then they have ERPs as well, enterprise resource planning software. So those softwares are for business productivity. That's again another example of SaaS. And then the third one is finance tracking. So basically, some applications that manage your expenses, accounting, payroll software, payment processing software. Now, if you have seen, when you get a pay slip, that's again a software that you use, right? So that's again an example of software as a service. Something like ADP, that's very common here in Canada. You have other vendors as well that you could be using for payroll management and stuff like that, where you get your pay slips, where you are informed of, your T4s, your RL1s, and other tax forms. So those solutions are again an example of software as a service. Entire softwares running on a web, on someone else's machine, you are just consuming them on your web browser. Please understand the difference. When you have a software application that you have not installed on your machine and is accessible over your browser, that is when you are using a technology such as software as a service. Okay, and with this, the responsibility in software as a service is very limited. Again, the price is going up, responsibility is coming down. Identity and infrastructure. So you need to make sure that the identities are correct. You are creating the right user accounts. You have, you do not accidentally forget to delete the people who leave the organization, and controls similar to that. You make sure that the accounts and identities are correct. You make sure that the information and data is accurate. Tomorrow, if I'm entering someone's payslip, I by mistake enter an additional 0. Instead of showing the monthly salary as, pay as 1,000, I make it 10,000. That is my fault. Obviously, Azure is not responsible for that, or any software as a service provider is not responsible for that. So data and information is obviously the responsibility of the customer. Now we'll come to the cloud model after the break. Let me tell you what's going to happen. Just hold on a little bit. So right now it is 12. We've covered about almost halfway of what we had to cover for today, because a lot of you were asking questions on the way. I am liking it this way because this makes the session very interactive. As I said, as per the plan, every day 10 to 12 we'll have first session. 12 to 1 will be your first break because in this break I am going to be here. I'll stop the recording, but I'll still be here. I might go if no one has any questions, obviously, but you can put them in the chat. I'll be around my machine. Reason being because if you have any questions that were unanswered, I'll be answering them at this time. If not, you can take a break for 1 hour, be back sharp at 1. You can start joining by 12:55-ish, okay? We'll start the second part where we are also going to do, the practical. So there is some practical that we would be, practical portion that we need to start today. We at least need to create our accounts today. So we'll talk more about that. Other than that, you guys can stay back if you want to, just stay a part of this call, or you could leave and join back again. I'll answer your questions in 2 minutes. But before I do that, I've just got a ping from Ruchika. She might have to talk to you about something. I'll let her speak first and then we'll continue. So if you guys have no questions, you want to go for a break, let Ruchika finish what she has to talk about. And then you guys can either stay on the call, turn off the videos, take a break, be back at 12:55. We'll start at 1 around. We will start sharp 1. And if not, I think, Ruchika, you can take over.
Guys, just this one thing, that please fill out this form for your attendance, since we just have received, I have just received 36 replies. So make sure that you fill this form before you go